He sat alone on a park bench on Christmas Eve, wealthy beyond imagination, yet completely forgotten. No wife, no children who cared, just silence and snow. Until a little girl with golden curls and a paper star approached him with a question no one had asked in years. Would you like to have Christmas dinner with us? She didn't recognize who he was. But what started as an innocent invitation transformed into a miracle no one anticipated. Stay with us until the end to discover who the little girl was or who sent her. Please share which country you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It was Christmas Eve, and the city radiated warmth. Twinkling lights wrapped around lampposts. Laughter spilled out from cafes. And the air was alive with the scent of roasted chestnuts. Yet for Henry Whitmore, none of it mattered. Dressed in a long charcoal coat and polished leather shoes, Henry sat on a worn park bench near Boston Common, motionless, his hands resting on a cane carved by his late wife decades ago, now in his 70s. Sharp-minded, impeccably mannered, and tremendously wealthy, Welp was cold comfort when the seat beside him had been empty for a year. Last Christmas, he lost Margaret, his wife of 50 years. She had been the only warmth in his gilded world. Since her passing, the grand halls of his Beacon Hill mansion echoed with silence. His children, grown and distant, rarely called, too busy, too different, and as the world celebrated around him, Henry sat alone, watching life go on without him. Snow began to fall, soft, steady flakes, and he adjusted his scarf with a sigh. Then he heard it, small footsteps. A little girl, bundled in a worn red coat with golden curls peeking out from under her knitted hat, stood before him. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her big blue eyes shimmered with kindness that seemed too vast for someone so small. "Sir," she said sweetly, "are you eating dinner all by yourself?" Henry blinked, startled. "My mommy says nobody should be alone on Christmas. Would you like to have dinner with us?" She held out her mittened hand, as if offering magic. He stared at her, this stranger, this tiny force of nature. "And what's your name?" "Little one, I'm Ellie." She smiled. "And we live just there behind the bakery with the candy canes in the window." She tugged gently at his hand, and somehow he let her. Together, they walked down the narrow street, an old man and a child, their steps slow and uneven but strangely in sync. When they reached a small apartment above a corner grocery store, Ellie beamed. "We're here." The door opened before she could knock. A woman in her late 20s stood there, her face flushed from cooking. Her eyes landed on Henry, surprise, hesitation, and a quiet welcome flashed across her features. "Mommy, this is the man I told you about," Ellie announced. He was all alone. Henry offered a polite nod. "I hope I'm not intruding." Ellie's father then appeared, drying his hands on a towel. He froze when he saw Henry, not from suspicion, but recognition, or something similar. A long silence followed before he spoke. "I'm David, Ellie's father. Please come in." The apartment was small, but radiated warmth. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and roasted potatoes. A table in the corner was set with mismatched plates and a single flickering candle. A tiny artificial tree blinked from the windowsill, decorated with paper stars and cotton snow. Henry lowered himself into a chair, glancing at the cheerful clutter of family life. Drawings taped to the fridge, toys tucked into corners, slippers near the heater. Ellie sat across from him, cheeks glowing with pride. "This is your seat now." They ate together slowly. Henry hadn't tasted food like this in years, not because it was fancy, but because it was real, shared. Later, while Ellie played nearby, David sat quietly across from Henry, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. "You remind me of someone," David finally said. Henry looked up. "My father. He was wealthy too, but proud, cold. When I chose love over legacy, he shut the door behind me. Ellie's never met her grandfather. Henry's hand paused over his teacup. And you haven't spoken since? David shook his head. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have a father who cared more about people than pride. There was no accusation in his voice, just quiet truth. Henry looked at Ellie, now drawing stars with crayons, and felt something shift within him, a crack in the ice. I had children, he said softly. They stopped visiting after Margaret passed. I suppose I taught them more about wealth and love. David looked at him. You're here now, that counts. That night, after dinner, as Henry prepared to leave, Ellie rushed to the door and wrapped her arms around him. Will you come again? She whispered. Henry's voice trembled. If I'm welcome, you always have a seat here, she said. Over the following weeks, Henry kept returning, sometimes with books, other times with groceries or little gifts he thought Ellie might like, a tiny snow globe, a set of watercolor paints. He laughed more, listened more, and for the first time in years, felt needed. David began to warm up to him. They talked about life, loss, and fatherhood. One day, as they fixed a leaky kitchen pipe together, David quietly said, You know, I never imagined I'd get a second chance at having a dad. Henry didn't respond. He simply patted his shoulder and smiled. The next Christmas Eve arrived, with snow gently falling on the windows of the small apartment. Inside, laughter echoed, and 3 chairs sat around the table. Henry's coat hung by the door. Ellie danced in a green velvet dress, humming carols. After dinner, she tugged Henry's hand, leading him to the tree. Close your eyes, she said. When he opened them, she handed him a folded paper star, golden, messy, perfect. Crayon-written words read, For Grandpa Henry. His eyes filled with tears. He turned to David and Rachel, emotion swelling within his chest, feeling loved. Henry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. From it, he unfolded an old, worn photograph, yet still clear. A beautiful woman smiled back, eyes full of warmth and mischief. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder in the picture. This was Margaret. Henry whispered to Ellie, My wife. She passed 2 Christmases ago. I never showed you because I wasn't fully healed from her loss. Ellie looked at the photo and froze. Her small hand reached out slowly, eyes wide and unblinking. That's her, she said softly. That's the grandma from my dream. Henry's breath caught. Your dream. Ellie nodded, her voice just a whisper. She came to me while I was sleeping. She sat beside me and said, There's an old man sitting on a bench all by himself. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve. Henry felt the room tilt around him. Ellie continued, her brow furrowed in concentration. She told me I was an angel, that angels protect lonely people. She said, even though she's gone, you shouldn't have to be alone. You need someone to remind you that love didn't leave when she did. Tears welled in Henry's eyes. David and Rachel stood in the doorway, silent and still, listening. Ellie gently touched the photo. She smiled just like that. I didn't know her name, but I remember her heart. Henry pressed the photo to his chest. Trembling, she saw me. He whispered. Even after all this time, she saw how lost I was, and she sent you. Ellie, sleepy, rested her head against him. You were waiting for a family. I think you found us. Henry looked around at David, whose eyes shimmered with tears, at Rachel, holding her hand to her heart, and then back at Ellie, whose innocent faith bridged the gap from loneliness to love. Yes, he said, voice full and certain. I found you. I never thought I'd find family again. He added, voice breaking. But maybe Margaret saw I was lonely and sent me an angel. She led me here. A year later, Henry passed peacefully in his sleep. His lawyer arrived at the Monroe's apartment with a letter and a will. He had left everything, his estate, assets, trust funds, to Ellie Monroe. The letter read, "To the girl who found me in the cold and offered me warmth. You reminded me what it means to be human. This is not a reward. It's a thank you. Love, Grandpa Henry." And in that moment, as tears fell and Ellie clutched the letter to her chest, the family knew one simple truth. Home isn't built of walls or wealth. It's built of hearts that open their doors. And sometimes, a small act of kindness can change everything. If one simple act of kindness could change someone's entire life, would you have stopped to invite that lonely old man to dinner? Let us know. What would you have done that Christmas Eve? Please share in the comments below. And thank you for listening to Seeds of Rose.